guys, I'm Amber from Light Livin' Photography. I am a light and airy photographer in the Bay Area of California, and I love to shoot with families and maternity sessions. But today I really wanted to give you guys a quick and dirty lesson on manual mode for your camera so you're ready to start taking on clients and shooting luxury portraits. Before we jump in today, I want to let you know I do have a free lighting guide linked below, so make sure you check that out. After you get your manual mode settings ready to go, you will be ready for the next step, and that is mastering your lighting. Today, I'm going to teach you a lesson called Manual Mode Made Easy, because when I was first learning photography, that was the biggest thing that tripped me up, is understanding what is ISO, what is aperture, what is shutter speed. Those three things kind of confused me and really prevented me from delving into a higher level of photography. I was shooting on auto mode or portrait mode or aperture mode, and I didn't really understand how to use my camera. And a lot of the courses and YouTube videos out there were too complicated for a beginner. So today I really want to have a no fluff introduction to what is manual mode and how does it work? How do all of those three things that I just mentioned, aperture, ISO, shutter speed, how do all of those three things affect how your photo looks and how your exposure looks? Exposure meaning how light or dark your photo looks. This video is going to be different from others that you've seen. I'm not going to have really technical jargon, confusing information about your camera. I'm just going to do the quick and easy, concise understanding of what you need to know for portrait photography. I'm not a landscape photographer. I don't do other types of photography. My specialization is really portrait photography. So if that's what you're looking for, keep watching. The first thing you need to know is exposure means controlling the light. So if we go really bright, it looks like this. If we go really dark, it looks like this. We want to be correctly exposed right in the middle. So skin tones look good, but the background isn't way too bright. So three things you need to understand are the relationship between aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Aperture is that nifty little thing on your camera that says F. If you ever wondered what is F, that is for your aperture. So aperture is going to bring in a lot of light if you have it at a low f-stop. So if you have it at 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, it's going to pull in tons of light into your camera. It's like opening a window really big and letting all of that sunshine come in. So that's a really easy way to control the light or exposure on your camera. If you do a really narrow aperture, so you're closing the blinds on the window really narrow, then that is going to actually be a larger F number, which is a little confusing. A narrower aperture is a large F number. So an F is like 5.6 or an 8 or a 10, that's going to be a really narrow aperture, and it's going to darken your photo a lot like this. So let's go ahead and bring our aperture to 8 so you can see what that does to the exposure. Light and airy tip number 1 is to shoot with a really wide aperture. You're going to bring in lots of light into your photo, have a really creamy background, beautiful skin tones, and that's just one of my basic tips for light and airy photography. If we go really wide, the wider we go, that's the widest my lens goes, is 1.2. It's very, very wide, and that's going to make the photo very, very bright. Shutter speed is the next element to controlling your exposure, and it also controls speed. So if you want to capture something moving really fast, you don't want your shutter speed to be too low because it won't capture that. It'll look really blurred out. So if you've ever seen a photo where there's a kid running across and it's super blurry, that's because the shutter speed was really low. To prevent that, we want to have the shutter speed at least 2 times the focal length. I really prefer 3 times the focal length to make sure that my my hands aren't shaking too much. When we're taking photos, our hands shake just a little bit, and that can even cause motion blur as well if we don't have our shutter speed right. So having your shutter speed at about 3 times the focal length is really great because that's going to capture the image and not have blur. Now, what I mean by 3 times the focal length, if you're not familiar with that term focal length, that means the focal length of the lens. So say you're on a 50mm lens, you want to have a minimum of 1/150 for your shutter speed, minimum. But let's talk about understanding kind of the basics, really breaking down the basics of shutter speed so you can remember it better. So I like to think of shutter speed as the hungry mouse. So a mouse takes tons of really quick bites, and light is like its food. So it's going to be eating really, really fast and really, really tiny amounts. So if your shutter speed is really high, that's like taking really tiny bites of light. And so that's why it's going to make your photo look darker. So let's go ahead and see now what shutter speed does to the exposure by bringing the exposure way, way up. So we're going to be a really fast mouse, take tiny bites of light, and we're going to bring that shutter speed way up, and now you can see that exposure go down again. So this is a different way of affecting your exposure. So you need to know all the different ways to shoot in manual mode, what's going to affect your exposure and the amount of light coming into your camera. So when we go way up, like 1/800 or 1/1000, that's going to be really high, something you would want on the beach or in really bright light to bring down the exposure so you're not getting a too bright, blown out image. A really slow shutter speed, remember that's going to cause motion blur if it's too slow. However, if you're in a really dark light scenario, like it's close to sunset and you need more light coming naturally into your camera, well, you can bring it down to that minimum shutter speed we talked about. And having a slower shutter speed is going to be like a hungry lion. So I want you guys to think slow shutter speed is a hungry lion. High shutter speed is a hungry mouse. A lion is really big and a lot slower than a mouse. It's going to take big, slow bites like that. So it's going to take, the food is the light, remember? So it's going to take a big, slow bite of the light, and that is going to bring in a lot more light because it has more time to enter the lens, right? So that's how we're going to remember slow shutter speed brings in more light and makes your image brighter. So as you can see, if we go down on the shutter speed, it's going to look like this. It's a lot brighter, too blown out if we have it too low, right? So shutter speed really affects the exposure that way. Now you're going to understand ISO. So ISO, I like to call that the fake light because that's going to be once you've had already put in your settings where you want them. Like say you want to keep your aperture at 1.8, you don't want it to be a different aperture than that for whatever reason. And then you have your shutter speed already at the minimum shutter speed, but it's still kind of dark and you want to bring it up. So last, you're going to add in that ISO. This is how I think of things. We've got the aperture, the shutter speed, and then last resort is the ISO. So really we want to keep the ISO as low as possible, but it's a last resort if we need to add in more fake light to the image because it's still too dark, which for a light and area photographer, it's really important not to shoot way too dark in camera. So we will bring up the ISO if it's dark in the surroundings, getting kind of late, and we absolutely have to. But other than that, we like to keep it as low as possible, around 100. So see on this dial, when I push the ISO button, I can go up really bright, that's way blown out, or really dark. Oops. So that's how your ISO will bring in fake light to your camera if you need to add in some more. So now that you understand the basics of exposure, we can talk about some other elements that are still related to these three things. So aperture, we're really going to talk about in terms of it not only is there to bring in more light into your camera the wider you go, but it also is going to affect the overall look of your image. So if you're shooting wider, like 1.6, 1.4, you're going to get the subject, and a very small pinpoint on the subject is going to be in focus, and then everything behind it is going to be really blurred out. The other element is how far away that background is from the subject. So if you're at a wide aperture and something's right behind it, it's close to the plane of focus, meaning the line, horizontal line where everything is in focus. If it's close, you'll still be able to see it pretty well, but the further back it goes behind the subject that's in focus, the more and more and more and more blurred out it will be. Here's a graph that I'm going to show you. This is the plane of focus. So it's something that's really important to understand, that if you're shooting wide, everything around, in front, and behind is going to be out of focus. So the plane of focus, again, is that line of focus. So if I'm focusing on someone's eyeballs and I'm shooting wide, only a string in the horizontal line of my eyeballs is going to be in focus, okay? So some people get really concerned, so they're like, oh, should I shoot at 4 or 5 to make sure everyone in the family is in focus? Well, not necessarily. Sometimes we really love to have the focus on just one person, and then other people are in and out of focus, and it really adds to the artistic element of the photo, and that's just okay. But we need to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it to make sure that it's an artistic choice and not an accidental choice. One of the elements to light and airy photography is that creamy, dreamy blur in the background, which I absolutely love. If you're a landscape photographer and you're trying to get everything in focus, you won't love that so much. But if you really love light and airy portrait photography, you're gonna love when you shoot at a wide aperture, because the background is gonna look really dreamy and creamy, and you're gonna have that bokeh blur that we're going for. So here's my step-by-step exposure guide. This is maybe not how everyone does it, but this is how it's always made sense to me ever since I started learning manual mode, okay? So I first set my aperture, because I'm very particular, because of my style, what aperture I want to be at. So I want to be at a wide aperture. I'm going to set that first. Next, I'm going to set my shutter speed, usually around 3 times the focal length, but it depends on the brightness of the photo. And then last, we're going to set that ISO, and that's going to be, remember, our last resort for bringing more light into the camera. So I really go into depth on all these things, what I'm looking for, how I expose, how I do my white balance. So you can see a behind the scenes at all my sessions, exactly how I do what I do in my full course, the Light Live-In Transformation course. So if you really need help going further into this style and understanding a much more advanced version of this, then you're definitely going to want to check out that course. Or at least for the next step, definitely make sure you download the lighting guide, because lighting is another really important element that we won't have time to go into in this course today. But I hope that this really helped you understand all the manual mode basics, what you need to be able to set your camera on manual mode and understand. Start playing with it today. I want you to go ahead and grab your camera and start playing with the settings. Go ahead in the house, just have someone in front of you, play with the shutter speeds up and down. See how that makes your photo lighter or darker. Play with the aperture. See how that makes your photo lighter and darker, how that affects the background blur, all of that. So I hope that you guys are able to go out and start practicing today manual mode on your camera. That's it. Thanks for watching, you guys. I hope you will hit the subscribe button below. Let me know in the comments what other videos you'd like to see from me, and make sure you also grab that free lighting guide below. Thanks, guys.